Welcome everyone to today's webinar on driving growth on a shoestring budget. I want to warmly welcome my fellow panelists, Nidhi, Rahul, Vasudha, and Gaurav. JOP, for which Gaurav is the CEO, is hosting this webinar. So thank you for giving all of us this opportunity to talk about this topic, which is really dear to my heart. So the topic is driving growth on a shoestring budget. So first, we'll go through the introductions, and then I will introduce the topic, and then we'll go through questions for various panelists. And we'll also, meanwhile, take a look at some of the exciting slides that Gaurav and Nidhi has. And then we'll open it up for questions in the end. So I will start with my introductions. I'm Hrishikesh Sathawane. I've been in the Bay Area for almost 25 years, initially as an engineer. Then after MBA, I moved on to the dark side of marketing. But in the process, creating light, I guess, for the customers and the engineers by connecting the dots in between. My previous role was with Samsung, where I drove open innovation by working with startups. And it essentially means creating growth by working and leveraging the innovation that's happening outside the company to find new markets for the company products. Right now, I am mentoring and advising a few different startups from climate tech to SaaS, etc. And this is a fun ride, and I'm fully enjoying that. With that, I'll invite my fellow panelists to introduce themselves. So, Rahul.
Thanks, Rishi. Happy to be here. Thanks, Gaurav, for inviting me. So I'll make it short and sweet. I've known Rishi for a very long time. He's a dear friend, and excited to be here. My journey is a little bit similar. Engineering, then product, then marketing. I have done very large companies, Salesforce, Cisco, AT&T, and some very tiny startups like Rapid, Pivotal, VMware, and mostly in B2B SaaS, and now working as a head of marketing and advising a couple of different firms. And this is a fun topic because it's a difficult one. So I know we're going to dive into it. You know, what do you mean by growth? And hopefully Rishi will help define shoestring. Shoestring is different things for different people. So I'm looking forward to having a great discussion with the panel here. Thank you.
Vasudha?
Hey, hi, I'm Vasudha Badri Paul, and my background actually is math and physics. I'm not an engineer, and then I moved into the interesting area of marketing, though I wanted to be an astrophysicist first, but I decided, hey, maybe marketing is kind of interesting. So got my MBA in New York, Rochester, and ever since then I've been in marketing, whether in multi-technology, because I moved to the Bay Area, but also in healthcare. I worked at shoestring companies too. So using the term, just emerging startups, voice AI, API, marketplaces, even worked for a co-processor company, but also did some stints at big companies. Microsoft, Intel was my latest gig, where I managed the open source initiative for one of their products called Open Visual Cloud. And yeah, it's an interesting topic, driving growth and shoestring budget. And let's get deeper into it and figure out how we drive growth on a small, teeny budget, or a budget that needs expansion, but we don't have it.
Thanks, Vasudha. Nidhi?
Thanks, Vasudha, and thanks, Rishi, and thanks, Rahul. Yeah, excited to be here, and thanks to Gaurav and Rishi and everybody for inviting me here as well. My background, I started my career as an engineer 20 years ago, and then moved mostly onto product and analysis. And I did my master's in analytics from NYU Stern. So we both are NYU alumni as well, Gaurav and myself. Right now, and I was in financial services for a very long time. at some of the key investment banks. And then recently, I joined a startup, My Bliss, and we are building AI-powered technology for improving holistic well-being for people. And I'm a meditation coach and a teacher, so very passionate about well-being. And this is a topic close to my heart. But OKR, I think, is one of the key areas at which I feel is critical when you're growing and when you're scaling the company. And having done it myself in my previous roles, I feel this is a great topic to discuss. So excited to discuss that today. Thank you.
Thank you, Nidhi. So, Gaurav?
Yeah, thank you everyone for being here, on a Tuesday evening. And yeah, this is an important subject for me, and I kind of relate it with less is more, right? And that is what has gotten success for me. So my background, I have been an entrepreneur for a little over 2 decades now. This is maybe the fourth startup that I'm building up, and mostly built in India for global. That is the model that we have run in the past, and that is what we are doing at Job as well, with offices in New York and New Delhi. And yeah, happy to be here. OKRs is a great framework which allows you to kind of focus, and we'll dive deep into it as we go along. But yeah, go on, Rishi.
So we will be talking about OKRs as it is a part of the, at least one part of the solution. So Gaurav, can you maybe take us like very briefly into what OKR is and what is it? How is it used by companies so far?
Sure, absolutely. Even before OKR, what I'll do is, if you allow me, let me share my screen and get onto why did we even get into OKRs in the first place, right? Why is it even required? And I think it will give our audience a little understanding from the start. So I'm a big believer of the cafe model. Now, if you can see my screen, this is something that we kind of breed, eat in our kind of value and our culture in our organization. Now, what cafe is, it's nothing fancy, but really bringing out the clarity of where one needs to go in their business or professional life. And it's important that there is one direction for an organization to follow. So whether you call it a North Pole, BHAG, however you want to say it, but when people know what the target is, it's easier to kind of follow the path, right? And people are moving in one direction. Once that clarity is transparent from the CEO to the janitor, then how do you align resources? And this is again going back to our topic today, which is shoestring budget or less is more, however you want to say it. But in every organization, no matter how big, small they are, and I'm sure with your experience as well, everyone in this panel, they can realize that even at a organization such as Google, which has got like thousands and thousands of employees, right? Resources at a given point are still limited. And for you to get the most out of them, you need to align the teams. You need to align those resources. So they're not thinking in silo, but really thinking in one direction, which can move the needle. And then, I mean, the world that we live in today is not where we need to make fewer choices. It's more about what are the choices you make at this point of time. So it's about having a spotlight rather than a floodlight approach, right? And that's where the focus comes in, and then the magic of execution. We all know it, but how do we enable execution in an organization rather than just demand it for people? So this is the cafe model that we kind of follow, and the whole product that we have created, which is Job, is around this cafe model as well. Now, of course, there are many frameworks out there which kind of get this done, like the balanced scorecard, V2MOM, MBO, and so on and so forth. But what we chose is OKRs, objective key results. Again, the history of OKRs has been that it's been around the 90s, where Intel kind of made it popular. John Doerr from Google really made it mainstream. And today, a lot of startups, scale ups in the Valley and all across the globe are using it. And it's not just used for tech, but manufacturing, retail, real estate, a lot of different industries are using it as well. So kind of wanted to give this background of where we are coming from.
Okay, thanks, Gaurav. This was helpful to set the context, at least from where you are coming. So we already have some interesting questions, and I know Rahul was also asking for it. What is shoestring? So shoestring, if whether you're working for a big company or a small company, from my perspective at least, there was always scarce resources. I mean, do you all agree with it? I mean, no matter how big the company is, there's always some resource constraint. Does that resonate with you all?
Not always. I don't think that's true that always, but often, I think more often. Like you think that in a big company like Intel or Microsoft, and your department will have immense resources, but it's often not the case because they allocate tight budgets. It's the outcome of a company's profitability, right? So,
and when we talk about resources, it's not just a budget or money. It could be time. It could be people. It could be various other things. So, do you have any examples? Where you kind of saw those constraints in resources in your past lives? I know, at least for me, Vasudha, when we were working together, marketing TiECon, we always ran short of volunteers. And of course, there was very little budget to start with.
Yeah, it was a resource budget. For our volunteers were our resources. So we ran out of volunteers. So we had to kind of like figure out ways to kind of work with that. Sometimes we took the burden, right? Because we did it. If I can speak to that, I mean, Intel, the way Intel kind of invented the OKRs, right? Andy Grove was made it very popular in the 1970s. And it was like a Bible in Intel. Every group had to use OKRs and report. But in the group that I worked in, which was an open source initiative, Open Visual Cloud, it was interesting to see that resources were partitioned. So an engineer would not work for us full time. They would be like 1/4 of the time would be in the open source, and the rest of the time would be in, a more like some other engineering department. So I was surprised to see that there were restraints on the work, the time, the budget. There were restraints. I mean, resources were restrained. So it was like you have to work within a certain budget for the quarter. And sometimes that meant delaying a project a little more, or choosing very carefully what projects you work with.
Yeah. If I can
also, go ahead, Nidhi.
Sure. If I can add to that, an analogy which I always think of is an athlete who's preparing for a marathon. And then no matter how much resource that athlete has, he or she is always competing with people. And then that could be, so let's say we have $1 million budget for the athlete to succeed. That might still not be enough and might not confirm that this person is going to win. And that could be a time constraint as well. And there could be a scope constraint as well. So and this is an information I was just like browsing Project Management Institute. So there is a triangle concept on the constraint side that they talk about 3 things, which is time, scope, and cost. So I feel that similarly in life and in business, we face similar challenges.
So, I mean, we all agree that no matter where you are, big, small company, nonprofit or very profitable company, depending on the project, most of the time you'll always be constrained by some resources. So what are some of the ways you counteract that or get over that? I know productivity software is very popular, but there could be a lot of different ways to, still deliver results that you have to. Because I mean, realistically speaking, your competition is kind of also in a similar constrained environment, and you still have to win in the market. So what are some of the ways to kind of save money and still produce results?
Maybe if I can add two things to that, what I have seen in my own experience was one is transparency and a place where everybody can go and check what are the different OKRs cross-functionally among various teams at a high level. So that gives everybody confidence how their priorities are aligned with the rest of the teams. And then setting a regular cadence in terms of if I ask a team to finalize their OKRs just a week prior to the quarter, that might not be the best thing to do. So that cadence at an organizational level is very important. And once you get into that, it's like lifestyle change, and it's like a organizational change when you're driving transformation. So how do we build the right habits within the organization? How do we set right processes? I think that really helps in implementing success of the implementation of OKR process.
Thank you. Vasudha and Rahul, do you want to add something there?
Sure. I might. Yeah, and I'm watching some of the questions. So I think the good questions from Manohar and others, right? So if I will give you my experience. My experience has been in SaaS mostly. So to give you an example, right? I think the questions are good. What is define growth and define shoestring? So growth typically is measured around profitability and revenue. And sometimes it's just the number of users, right? So that happens a lot as well. And if you were to take a very common rule in B2B SaaS or SaaS, it's the rule of 40. The rule of 40 means that the way you calculate it is that you add two numbers. You add your growth in percentage and you add your profit margin. And if the addition of these two numbers is below 40, you are not operating at a growth level. You're basically not passing the rule of 40. So that's a metric that's used by many VC firms in the industry about the rule of 40. And that might be, so that might answer the question, what does growth look like? And when should it be done? Now, the shoestring budget question on the flip side is how do you, the way you can increase your profit margin sometimes is by reducing costs. You have to be careful if you, that may increase your profit margin, but may actually pose some problems in terms of your revenue run rate and your potential to keep growing. So it's a tricky thing. And one thing I will say is, there's not like a golden rule that says this is how to grow. It depends on what your focus is. So let's say, for example, in the early stages of a company, the focus is really mostly on revenue and not on profitability. And there's been a lot of companies like that, right? I mean, I forget when Salesforce was not profitable for more than 16 years of its existence. And I think it's been around for 21, 22 years. And there's a host of companies. Even today, I think you'll find some pretty big names that you might, if you look into their 10Ks, they have phenomenal revenue and the Wall Street, rewards them. They're still not profitable. So that's an interesting conversation. So it depends what lever you're trying to pull. Now, shoestring or the budget where you might adapt the budget has to depend whether you're doing for profitability or for revenue. So I'll pause there, but that was sort of just an input with the SaaS model and some of the questions that were coming in the chat window.
So let me share some slides. I wanted to talk about what I had in mind. Over the last 10 years or so, I was always asked to find new growth opportunities, whether it's Toshiba, Western Digital, or Samsung. And I knew 3 ways to do it. One is to find new markets. So you have the same products, but you go and try to find new markets where you can sell it. The second was open innovation, which is what I was doing at Samsung. This is to leverage innovation that's happening outside your company. So at startups and maybe customers, and you figure out ways to get into new customers or markets. And the third was realign our internal realignment to the markets so as to remove some sort of friction. So for example, your sales team is dominant in market A, but now market C is showing more rapid growth or potential, and that needs more attention, or it has better profitability. So you need to kind of do some sort of reorganization. Now, each of these 3 are, they cost a lot of money. When you're chasing new markets, you have to get access to maybe reports, maybe experts, maybe you need to hire a new person. Same thing for open innovation and etc. You need to have a CVC team or dedicated team associated with that. And most of the people in those teams are very senior. So not really easy for a lot of companies to do. And that's what companies like Pegasus and Plug and Pay exist, where they give it out to these companies. A lot of Asian companies, even American companies, they let Plug and Play handle their open innovation. And the third, reorg, again, this could be a painful process, or you may have to bulk up the team. So none of them are cheap. And when I started engaging with JOP, I found OKR. And I know Nina asked the question, what is OKR? And that's what Gaurav was hoping you would touch upon. So OKR is a framework called Objectives, Keys, and Results. So this was pioneered by Intel many, many years ago. John Doerr wrote a big book on it, which is very popular. And John Doerr is the same guy who gave $1 billion to Stanford University for the Doerr School of Sustainability. And later, the framework was picked up by Google and many other big companies to really align their strategy to execution. So you set some objectives, and then you define key results to attain those objectives, and then you follow set it at each level of the organization, and hopefully your strategy is kind of aligned at all levels. And as long as people execute, you're kind of meeting your objectives eventually. But the way a lot of people implement it, it's not effective, or they don't really know how to set objectives. But the way I have seen GOP implementing it, it's pretty powerful. And I'll let Gaurav talk about it a little bit later. So in my experience, OKR is one of the cheaper ways to create that growth. I will let panel talk more about this. The different ways. I mean, OKR is definitely one way to create that growth, but I would love to get more ideas on how to create that efficiency, how to get work done with less resources.
Can I start with, I'll continue with OKR because I saw it implemented really well. So if I can take you through what we did at Intel every quarter, like maybe a month before the quarter started, we would all get band together and, kind of populate our OKRs. And then we would discuss it in a couple of meetings. Everybody had their OKRs and we would discuss it for the team at the team level. So each individual had their own responsibilities, but at a team level, we had a bunch of OKRs that everybody agreed upon. And then we would put deadlines, and it was just for the quarter. So we would put deadlines, we would put dependencies, we would see who's the ownership. So that level of detail was done. before the quarter started, and everybody had to agree on it, and that was established as those were the OKRs for the quarter. Okay, very rarely did it change. And then every week we would have a meeting, and then we would like go through all the OKRs, and then actually have like color coded highlighters, like is this green, is this red, is this yellow? So almost like a project management. And then of course the OKRs stated what's the outcome of that, right? What were the metrics we collected if it's a campaign? So everything was detailed every week, and that's how we would implement and tracking was very critical. So that's the pragmatic way that we implemented it, very successful. And if I can talk about a couple of other things for success is, I come from a pure marketing background, so hey, organic is the way to go. And that's very different from OKRs, but if you're talking about social media, which Hrishi and I know a lot about, and Hrishi learned a lot during TIE, a lot of, we throw money at Facebook, LinkedIn, I mean, all these companies, big companies just take our money, right? And run with it, and very successfully. But if you can learn how to market a product organically by getting, getting influencers involved, which could be your speakers or your people in your company who have a large footprint in social media. I mean, if you know the keywords, I mean, that's one thing you do for growth and shoestring in the social media world, which is becoming more and more important. So that's my two for today.
So
I might also add, thank you, Vasudha, that makes a bunch of sense. And social is a really good one that you mentioned, right? Because like maybe a decade ago, it wasn't that easy to get that reach out to that many people. It was an expensive spend. I also like, some of the questions people have asked is, it's not just the growth is, you can get growth through, you can get the cost efficiency through many ways, right? Retention, upselling, remote work is a cost saver. Flexible work schedules is a cost saver. The partnerships that you have. And if we take some of the big companies out of the picture, so for now, let me just put all the big companies that this panel has worked at. Samsung, Intel, take them out of the picture. Think of companies that are much smaller. They have to work with way fewer budgets. I mean, Gaurav can probably tell you he's running a company, right? So there, I think it is a little bit like, every dollar matters. So the negotiations that you can do with your partners, the ecosystem that you can have, very lean marketing strategies. Vasudha mentioned content marketing, social media, very targeted online and LinkedIn, very strong analytics. So you can really effectively know which channels are working for you and not do a little bit of a spray everywhere, because a lot of these channels are not cheap to continuously advertise on and take your product. So I think there's a lot of different ways to get that growth. And I think what's interesting, what Rishi talked about here, where he showed 3 things, and then he said he discovered a 4th thing called OKRs, which I think is terrific, because a lot of times we forget that growth can come through just moving far more efficiently. And as if you've got 10 people who are way more aligned, and as Gaurav was saying, rowing in the same direction, you automatically have efficiencies that you wouldn't have, that you may need 15 people to do the same work. And I think that's really interesting. That's where a lot of the OKR comes in. And whether it's scaled to, 5,000 people, 500,000 people company, or a 10-person company, it's really interesting to see that some of that growth efficiencies can come from just people and not strategies and tools.
Thanks, Rahul. And I might just add to that as well, because I have a very heavy product background. I also think in terms of retention, and also when you're building growth loops into your product, that plays a key role in driving growth. And then let's say, and as you said, keep out the big companies, but just let's say look at the smaller early growth stage companies. Even if I'm spending $100 or $200 on lean marketing, then the impact that might have in terms of 10x leverage or 100x leverage in terms of either my bottom line on revenue or user adoption or acquisition, that plays a key role in determining where the focus should be. And I think that's how we optimize this tug of war between growth versus cost efficiency and things like that.
Yeah,
Rahul
absolutely.
briefly touched upon one aspect, which is, the employees. And I mean, one of the technique that a lot of US-based companies do is to outsource at least some workforce to India or some East European countries, etc. But Gaurav, you're already operating mostly in India, so that's not really an option for you.
Yeah, I think interesting conversations. And if I may, again, I want to share one slide here, right? And I think, again, these frameworks and these fancy words like OKRs and, V2MOMs or balanced scorecard, but what do they solve for? So hopefully my screen is visible and you guys can see what I have to present here.
Yes.
This is where I think it kind of goes back to and kind of brings about the focus, and it all starts with the nucleus or the core, or what is that vision and strategy of the organization. And it can be any, like Rahul kind of mentioned before. Some go for profitability, some go for revenue, some go for optimizing both, and the 40 principle, and so on and so forth. But what is it that the company really wants to go for is the vision and strategy, which has to be set by the leadership, right? Now, whether you want to increase your revenue or optimize cost for profit, you need to take certain big moves. You need to come around and figure out what are the things that I'm going to do as a team, or we are going to do as a team in this particular year. And those are the big moves which one needs to identify and make it public in the organization. Again, small, big, and the more larger the organization is, the more complex it is to kind of even communicate that so that people can be aligned and really think in the same direction, right? And from there, the first level of OKRs, which is the corporate level, the company level, where the organization has to go, comes in. And then you cascade it down to key results because, measure what matters. When you have to have matrix, you need to know the X and the Y, the starting point and the end point, so you can measure progress as you go along and take those initiatives, projects, actions, if you may, to get there as well. And then you go into the level 2, level 3 OKRs, which are more business units, teams, individuals, and then align them visually, right? You can see the cause and effect that every time the needle gets moved on individual OKRs or teams OKRs, how does it impact the corporate? So I think this is just a structure, and the reason I wanted to share that is I think sometimes when you see visual kind of depiction of what we are talking about, it just makes it a little easier for our audience to kind of understand.
And this also kind of explains the OKR framework can be very simple, just objectives and key results. But once you start getting deeper into it, it can get fairly methodical, as well as there's a lot of things that you can do to really make sure it is going to have an organizational impact instead of just you trying to drive things on your own. There are already people have already experimented with this for a long time, and they have evolved a better and better way of implementing it.
The other thing I'd like to, sorry, go ahead, Gaurav.
No, absolutely. I was just going to say is that, two things that I have seen in practicality while working with my teams in different businesses that I have is that OKR has changed two things for us, which is it has made us more outcome driven than output driven. So we are more focused on where we want to be and how we will get there than, how busy are we and what all are we doing. And the second thing is that we can go for the stretch. We can have stretch targets and not be worried about failure, because now we have a framework that can help us through that process. So this outcome and stretch are the two takeaways that it really helps teams, and I've experienced that. Go on, Rahul.
Yeah, no, plus one. I also just want to add, I think it's very important because these ideas have come out of big companies, right? I don't think a startup, Peter Drucker came up with a concept, then it went to Intel. I don't think a 15-person company came up with the idea. However, I think what's really valuable, is these principles do apply to smaller firms, because the complexity of building products and launching products and being successful in the market has become a lot more complex. So I'm not sure you need an OKR frameworks if you're 3 people. Maybe not. Maybe it's an overkill, right? But I think even for smaller
If 3 people
companies,
cannot align, then you should not.
right. If you 3 people can't align, 5 people, then you maybe have some other problems that you might want to consider. But I think what's fascinating is that a lot of people think, oh, these frameworks are for, companies with 5,000 employees and more. And you'd be surprised that even at a size of 20, 30 people, it's very quickly the 10th person and the 9th person and the 25th person doesn't know exactly where to row. And there's another question that's very interesting that came up that talks about how does a small company or a startup drive growth with $0? I don't know how you grow with nothing. So I would say I don't know the answer to how you grow with absolutely nothing. Maybe some geniuses, that could be like, I would even say, let's take the example of people who are successful on UGC, user-generated content like TikTok, like YouTube. I don't think it's $0 because it's their time, it's their energy, it's their refinement of whatever videos they're making, and there's a cost to that. But I just wanted to bring back the point to the fact that these frameworks may seem like big company things, and they have come out of big companies, but the advantage is they're equally applicable to smaller firms as well.
Thanks, Rahul. Just to add to that question, it's a very interesting question on how do you drive growth with $0? And I know this is the cost aspect which Manohar is specifically focusing on. And I feel that, let's say I'm in school or college, I build an app and I want to grow that product. So what would I do? My first step would be maybe I'll share it with my friends. I'll share it with extended family or the school where I study or so the community aspect plays a key role when you are, in my experience, there could be multiple other ways, but community aspect, if you can inject and the community adopts, that might be the easiest way of organic adoption of a product. And then there are various ways as well, but you're absolutely right on the time aspect. If you have to factor in time as cost, then then it's not $0. You might as well spend that time somewhere else.
Speaking from a nonprofit experience, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, community is big. We managed on again, I'm talking about big company, but Intel, it was all community growth, open source community growth. So community is big, organic is big, organic social media, email is kind of free. You pay for the tool maybe, but it's kind of free. I think, what is it? MailChimp, I think the first 500, your database is free. So use all those free tools. There's plenty of marketing tools out there that are free. Also want to say that partnerships, I've done partnerships at Intel. That's what you should think about. If you're a small fish and you have a good product, look for partners. And that's kind of free, right? Somebody likes your product, you can cobble together like a couple of products and sell it. So that's my take on that. It's not free or it's not zero, but it's shoestring budget is the word, not zero.
Yes, well said. Thank you. And I think there's an interesting conversation, which I think is a really good one. I can't see the name, but the question is, what are the potential risks associated with pursuing aggressive growth strategies? We touched on this a little bit. I think that's a very good question. It's always a question of trade-offs. What are you going to trade off for what? So if you are going for a very aggressive growth strategy with limited resources, again, I think what Gaurav is saying, the OKR becomes even more important, because what's going to happen is you might capture those trade-offs. So let's say you're going to let's say you make a prediction that in Q3, Q4 of your company, we really need to grow super aggressive. So we are going to, I don't know, hire more salespeople or do a lot of marketing. Or as Vasudha said, we're actually going to drop the price of our product just so we can get more volume. And you may end up getting more net, revenue from that. I think it's what's important is regardless of what strategy you take, because you don't know necessarily, if you knew what's going to work, you would already do it. It's not a discussion, right? If you know something's going to work, you're just going to do it. I think the question is when you're like, okay, what might be the trade-offs? What might be the risks? If I push this lever, you may actually lose some loyal customers who may feel, oh my God, how could you increase that price for me? Like what's happening in a lot of US companies, for example, today, they're turning the price dial. And for companies that haven't raised prices in 8-9 years, they're increasing it. And what is the price flexibility that your customers might allow? So I think the OKR framework still is a good one to capture that and then test it.
Right. So speaking of my nonprofit work with IIT Bay Area or HiCon, we pretty much executed it on very little dollars except for the social media paid campaigns. And we did it essentially by, raising that community feeling, giving some benefit to the volunteers. And it was all volunteer driven. But there is a limit on how much you can do it. You cannot do it forever. TiCon happens once a year. You engage for a couple of months, good, you can do it. But if I ask volunteer to keep doing it forever, it's very challenging. So that's the trade-off. You will burn out your volunteers if you keep on pushing that lever.
Well, that's a good point. The burnout, right? Yes, shoestring budget should not equal to burnout, and that's you got to keep an eye on.
Correct. There are other ways you're paying in terms of people's.
And I also think it also depends on where you are in the business and what the priority is right now, right? So if resources are limited and you want to achieve a target, that's not going to be the case always. You just got to be innovative, come to a point where you set up that target for the next 6-12 months, get it, maybe come close to it, and then the resources will open up. The market condition changes, your business condition changes, and things get better. So I don't think we need to restrict ourselves thinking that that's how companies are built and resources are always, always limited. Look at the economy, right? 2 years back, there was no problem with the resources. There were more resources than one can ask for. But that's not the case today. So I think things also change, and one just needs to, again, go back to the drawing board, think about, what the external factors are and how do you change with that, and then move on. So that's my thought around it.
Yeah, I love that. I'll share a great example. When I was at a startup, we had, I think it was 20 million users. So there's a lot of, it's called Rapid API. It's a marketplace. That's what it was before. So lots of users, not all paid, mostly unpaid, right? And then we've had some pretty impressive enterprise customers. Now to this question, who should we focus on and what should we grow? And what happened was it became this constant tug. Should we focus on the enterprise customers because their demands are pretty huge and they want everything in the world, they pay more? Or should we focus on this massive base that will someday convert, right, to maybe small and medium businesses? And one of the trade-offs that we would make on a regular basis is figure out in the roadmap that we are going to prioritize growth in specific quarters for specific customers. Or specific segments, if you will. So for example, there were a couple of important security updates that matter to the enterprise. So we focused on those in the first couple of quarters. But in the next couple of quarters, we actually said we're going to do small micro improvements that didn't need hiring more engineering resources. So that's limited. It means zero additional cost, but changing what you're prioritizing in your product is a way to get growth on, honestly, zero cost, zero additional cost, I would say, because somebody was asking about zero, right? Zero additional cost. Reprioritization is how we got there.
Super interesting. Okay.
You had some thoughts and slides on.
Yeah. Sure. I might just like spend 5 minutes going through a bunch of slides which I prepared for the group. So let me just share my screen. Do you all see my screen?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think what I just wanted to cover today was just philosophically what we are really talking about here from an OKR concept is the role of direction, and Gaurav touched on it as well, that it has to align with the overall business's vision and strategy, and leadership has to step in and put that into perspective, and then it kind of drills down on into the OKRs. And this is one of my favorite quotes, which I wanted to share with the group. It's from the book Atomic Habits, and it says that, you know, when you're flying a plane, and even a shift in the direction of 3.5 degrees can make it land in Washington, D.C. and not New York. So that direction is critical at an organizational level, no matter big or small, that helps you put things into perspective. And then I wanted to show you this framework, which I put together. And this is a sort of a Venn diagram where we are talking about goals, process, and environment. All of this, all these three things have to work together to make you succeed at an organization level and for that matter in life as well. And the habit loop concept. So once I've set a goal, how do I integrate that in the process? And then there are some rewards built in, let's say at an employee level. And then the environment, are we enabling? Is there a culture for supporting that OKR implementation and that transparency? So all these things come together, and that's heavy collaboration. And then the environment nudges back to reorient the goals. So this, when you think about it, it's a three key pillars of goals, process, and environment, which makes the overall framework succeed and we achieve our goals. So that's just I wanted to share with the group.
So what you're essentially bringing out, Nidhi, is with no additional cost or zero cost that Rahul was referring to, you just have to critically take a look at your organization, to create that middle success. Wherever there is a lack, you kind of use a proper mechanism to fill that one. Of course, it starts with setting the right direction, as you said, but all these other three key elements are important, and that's something anybody can do. Take a critical look at how their organization is structured. All the factors present to make you successful.
Absolutely, 100% agree with that.
So that's very key. And Gaurav, if you want to elaborate more on your cafe framework and how JLP kind of uses all these different concepts, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the way we look at it is that how, okay, so let me just speak about this. We may not have the time to go through slides now, but how do we take those 4 pillars of clarity, alignment, focus, and execution and really make it tangible? Because a lot of times we have seen that it's great to speak about these things, and we are all experienced enough to understand the importance of it. But how do we create a behavior so that people can come in and look at it quarter by quarter, week by week, and really figure out how to get closer to their goals, right? And that becomes extremely difficult if you're trying to do it on an Excel or a Google Sheet or whatnot, right? There's so many aspects where you want to align from your teams to your company or your individuals to your teams. You want to create certain actions or projects which will help you to move the needle. And all of that needs a platform, needs a particular product to do that. And that is where we bring job as a platform to our audience and to the market here. And yeah, we've got some great feedback. We've got a good customer base today who's using it, right from small, medium to even large enterprises globally, and giving us some great feedback. And we are also high on integrating AI. I mean, AI is an overused, abused term today, so I'm not going to get into that. But how to understand the different use cases and be that enabler, with the smart nudges, automations, integrations, and let the people or let the users understand what they have to do in order for them to get success is something that we are solving with AI. So yeah, so that's what we are doing with Job.
So Gaurav, I've seen your tool and I would like to compare it with something that everybody can understand. Back when I was at Iowa State, we had this IRC chat to connect with people. It worked. It allowed you to connect with people. It was very rudimentary, a lot of typing, etc., etc. If you look at WhatsApp today, it does the same thing, but it's a lot more evolved platform. It has simplified things for people. So, I compare OKR implementation on Excel to the IRC chat versus what you have, which really makes things easier.
Interesting. Great. So I think
we are coming close to the hour. There was one question that talks about how do you recommend balancing short-term gains with long-term sustainability when working with limited budgets? And Rahul and others, we touched briefly on it, but there is a term sustainability here. So I am not sure if the person means sustainability as in the ecological sustainability, or you're just talking about business sustainability?
I think it's sustained growth we're talking about. Yeah, I think so.
Right.
I think
so
to
in that
me,
situation, I think, yeah, go ahead.
Sure. So to me, sustainability means that if I am working with 50 partners today, even on the B2B side, it's critical for me to retain them and have that amazing experience of product going over and over years. So that's sustainability. How do we maintain that with limited budget? I think it's just making sure that the product is, or whatever service we are offering to our partners and clients at that point, if we are in a B2B space, then it has to be a partnership, and we are hearing them and we are prioritizing the right features and use cases for them. So I think that's how I would look at it, that retaining my key clients and partners from a sustainability or longer term perspective.
Anybody else has comments on
What was
this?
the question again? What was the question? Is it there in the chat?
It's in the Q&A section. How do you recommend balancing short-term gains with long-term sustainability, working on a limited budget?
Well, that's always the chicken or the egg, right? I mean, you have a dream and you have a long-term goal, right? Whether it's your company needs to be acquired or you have a revenue target in, say, 2 or 3 years, but how do you break that down and have short-term goals? It's hard. It's easy to be overwhelmed with your grandiose ideas, but I think it's really important for a startup, some of the shoestring budget, to be very pragmatic about where the dollars are being spent and how it aligns with the bigger vision and not get carried away. I think, taking those small steps, and I'm a believer in baby steps. Take the small baby steps, make mistakes, fast, fail. Just keep going, and while having the vision in mind, but be very, very tight about how you're spending your resources, and it's just measurement, trial and error, like in science, like in other things in life, trial and error, but quickly correct the error. Don't keep making the same mistakes, and be open, having an open mind. This is more like the personality of the CEO also matters, and the personality of the leadership is having an open mind, being able to gauge market conditions, open to changes, but not too many, obviously, but keeping the larger vision in mind and taking those baby steps very pragmatically. I've seen it work.
One more question I think we have here is, Manohar asks, it's difficult to attract partnerships when you're early on in the market. Do you guys have any comments on that?
No, I do have a comment on the previous one, which is, sustainability and short-term goals. I think for sustainability, one needs to understand that are you going to be relevant, let's say 5 years, 10 years from now? And can you be financially sustain your business? I think those are the two important things which one business needs to look at. And the way you do that is rather than short-term goals, I would say, how do you keep your 3-year kind of goals for that? Because 3 years is big enough, long enough for you to see where the market is today and how it's gonna kind of react in a shorter term thing. And then you take those annual goals and then you bring it down to your quarter goals. And if you were able to achieve those quarters, then your annual and then your 3-year goals, I think the sustainability can be far more achievable than just kind of thinking about it. So those are the few comments I had for that.
Yeah, I have a different train of thought on that. I mean, technology changes so rapidly in the markets. Sometimes it just change like that. So 3 years, sometimes it works, I agree, but sometimes you just got to be more agile because the market conditions change so rapidly, and especially in the geopolitical system we are today. I mean, with the wars going on and ChatGPT coming in, and everything seems like on steroids, right? And we don't know which way things are going to go. A lot of uncertainty in the market.
So, that last question, does anybody want to take up about partnerships? I mean, I have a take on that.
Yeah, go ahead, Rishi. I'll go after you.
Sure. What I've realized is if you don't do your homework about what the other party will benefit, it's more likely you will fail because you're asking them to do that work and you're going to them. You're much more likely to succeed if you do your homework, figure out how the other company will benefit from this partnership, and make sure they understand it in a clear fashion. You are much more likely to get partnerships. There are a small company may think they cannot offer anything to the big company, but that's not true. There are a lot of things small companies can offer that can be very valuable to companies, big companies. For example, let's say I was with Samsung with 50% market share, but that also means the other 50% customers are not, our customers. So if a startup can somehow rope in a customer from that segment or open markets in some new segment, for example, the big company doesn't have any presence in drones, and you somehow can give them access to that market. It could be a geographical market, for example. You are a Japanese company, you can open that market for them. So think creatively on what value you can bring to them, and you'll see there'll be partnerships.
Yeah. Plus one, Rishi. I think the two easiest way, the low-hanging fruits for partnerships is simple. One, what is the complement to your product? And one, what is the competitor to your product? And so, for example, if you're offering A and someone who really needs the A plus B, and you see the other person doing B, right? It's finding like, oh my God, if we go together, we're going to get a bigger share of the market. I think that's one example you gave. It's a clear complement. It's not a ton of integration. It's a go-to-market activity that can be done together. That's a clear one. The second one is competitors. If you're really competing head to head and you guys are actually hurting each other, partner with them. There's so much better ways to go at it together. You can divide territories. You can actually say we have a better offering. You will be far better paying attention. I think someone said this, I don't know if it was Gaurav or Vasudha, is don't pay attention to your competition that much. Focus on what you can just drive growth in terms of what the market and solving the customer problem. So I think those are the low-hanging fruits that I would think about.
Yeah, when I think about collaborating with your competitors, all these and monopoly thing comes to my mind. But I guess if you're a small company, you're kind of safe. Those monopolistic thing happens only when you're working really in the Fortune 500 or really big scale.
And
But yeah, there can
right? Frenemies, yeah. That can be used with competitors. And I like one more word that Rishi used, creativity. Yes, we never talked about creativity. I mean, shoestring budget is equal to creativity. You have to be creative, think out of the box, or have no box at all. So that's
right.
It's
all right. Anybody else have any do you have any last thoughts, or I will just summarize and close the session?
Just want to add one last thing was on the partnership side. I think if you're an early stage firm, then bringing on partners at a very early stage of product development and having them say and play a key role also sometimes might help. But although it depends on the leadership. If we really don't want to digress on what you are building, that makes sense. But I've seen businesses succeeding when they had partners early in their stage, and there was a huge amount of feedback going in on what kind of problem we are solving for the partners.
Right. Any last thoughts? Anybody else? All right. So thank you everyone for coming together and talking about creating growth on a shoestring budget. We touched upon various different ways of creating growth, defining what is a shoestring budget. It's not just money, it's other resources too. And we also discussed some creative ways of still continuing that growth trajectory with limited resources, and how various people are dealing with that. We also talked about Gaurav's startup, and Nidhi also talked about various frameworks that you can use with your existing team and make them work more effectively, more productively to drive that growth. So that was an amazing session. I also learned a lot during this session. Hopefully our audience is taking away all these wonderful insights and make use of them in their own lives. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me or Gaurav or any one of us, and we'll help you whichever way we can. And have a great rest of the week. Thank you.